Welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, most viewed, underviewed podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. I am, of course, your host, the most charismatic man. Beat that, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. It's a Friday. I hope everybody's having a great day, great week. Thank God it's Friday. A couple pointers before I bring on my guest. I am a little sick, and I was going to call off the podcast, postpone it, but then Denzel Washington called me this morning. He said, "Hey, I hear you're about to postpone the podcast. What's going on?" I let him know I'm not feeling well. He said, "Hey, I'm a big inspiration to you. So, don't do that." So that's why I'm here. I'm just kidding. I am sick though. And another thing, a lot of people ask why I wear my sunglasses in the intro. And it's because, and I tell people this all the time, TMZ is always trying to get a picture of me. Now, I just want to live a normal life like a regular person. But, they keep harassing me. I'm just kidding. But I want to bring on my next guest. He reached out to me last week to go on his podcast. Great experience. We had a great time. He got to know me as a person, and we had a great conversation. So I thought, why not bring him on to the most charismatic podcast? So, my next guest, he's been doing this since 2011. He is the host of the Neon Jazz Interviews podcast, which is also engineered by John Christopher, based out of Kansas City. Amazing guy. Couple things we're gonna get into in his backstory, but I'm gonna let him come on. So please give a warm welcome to the main man himself, Joe Dimino. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, Percy? I love that intro music.
Oh, I will tell you how I got. No, it's actually a free program music thing that I got. I needed something to set. Because when I first started the podcast, I started using random songs and stuff, which was fine, but
Sure.
I wanted something to make for my own.
Yes.
So came up with that.
Good on you. Yeah. I've been getting into chill hop lately, and it has that vibe. Just feels good, gets you going. It's like a good jazz tune, man. It just gets your motor going.
That's what I'm saying. Imagine just driving, stuck in traffic rather, and you got that playing. Come on. It's the best of both worlds.
Are you kidding? Time flies when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. But enough about me. Everybody hears about me a lot. So, this is your time to shine. So, Joe, like I said, thank you for having me on your podcast. We had a great conversation. So before we get to the meat and potatoes, because I do have something I want to ask you about.
Yes.
But, like I said, you've been, doing the podcast since 2011, and you started your professional journey. I won't say the year yet because I want to make you old. But how did you get into podcasting? Because a lot of people are doing podcasts now, but you've been doing it for a while. So what made you get into that line of work?
So look, I figured this out while doing a lot of podcasts. I was 4'11" in high school. I didn't have any prospects. I was a bench warmer. There wasn't a lot going on. And somewhere in my subconscious, conscious brain fused together and said, what would be a really cool profession? And I love sports. I used to watch all the broadcasters and revere them. So I decided to go down that route. In 1988, 89, I got serious about cutting out the sports page every morning. And I had an old microphone with old cassettes, and I would record a sports thing, my own sports thing. And then I got to the point where I decided to go to school. I was going to get into broadcasting. And I went to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, got into their journalism program, which they didn't really have one. It was communication studies. And then I got an internship with the Kansas City, with 61 Country, which was a radio station on Signal Hill in Kansas City. And I was doing pre and post game production work for the Royals. And I would take phone calls, and then I would tool around the studio. And the studio had a rock station called KY 102. It was like the #1 rock and roll format in the 80s. So I was bespeckled by all of this. And I was the guy that used to have to go and pick up food for everybody. So there's this macho steakhouse called the Hereford House. So we would do free ads for them, and I would go pick up the food. And most of the time I wouldn't even eat. I'd bring it into all these big shots, like ex-baseball players and these big jock guys that I listened to for years. And I might get a table scrap. But in between the game, when the game would play, I would go in the studio and I would record. So it's just been a passion. And I mean, I guess that's the first part of my broadcast journey. And then I was a writer at the time at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And I got on the inside of the whole sports broadcasting world. And I decided, I don't think so. I was following the Royals at a time where they were in a very dark period. And just the way that the players at the time were with the reporters and just the whole thing. And I thought, I want to etch a story that's more personalized. So I just stepped away from it and got into technology and marketing and design. I'm a visual artist as well, and I was writing. And all of it came, this modern podcasting journey I'm on came to a focus one day when I went to a thrift store and bought a Radio Shack raccoon that had a radio in its belly. And I hung the thing up on a porch. We just built a porch in the backyard. And this interpretation of Kansas City, of all things, comes on. And there's a guy named John Christopher, and it's called The Neon Beat. I reach out to him. I'm like, man, I love this. And I was doing part-time journalism at the time. I said, do you want to interview? And we interviewed. And it just so happened he lived 4 blocks away from me. He had a studio with all of this old equipment from KY 102 whenever I was doing it back in 93. It all came full circle. And he said, why don't you bring a script in? He knew my broadcast aspirations early on. He said, come on over. Let's do a script. And I've been doing it ever since. I'm on, 2011, 12 years now. And we do it once a week. And yeah, man, that's how it all happened.
Wow. Yeah, that was one of the things I saw. You started your journey in 1993. Started writing and creating. That was before I was born. So I want to ask you though. Because I follow mostly UFC, not so much baseball. Although I have a lot of buddies doing that line of work now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about journalism, from then to now? Because I see that, some people like the older generation, they don't like how some people aren't going to college for the degrees now. They just jumping right into it from high school, whatever. They starting podcasts or they doing YouTube, social media, and they're getting, they're able to cover, big events like that. Do you think that it has changed in a great way, or do you would like to see more people going to school for it, learning the business side and then going it that way?
I love what's going on with the younger generations, man. I think it's so good the cats are getting out without having to go through all of college is so expensive, man. And if you're good, you know what? At the end of the day, if you're good at anything in this life, you're going to get recognized for it. If you're not good, no one's going to follow you. You know that. With having a show and with what you do and being in entertainment and how you roll, if people don't like you, they're going to let you know and no one's going to follow you. So if you don't go to school and you just go in, good on you. And I love the younger generation. I have a couple teenagers at home. I love the fact that people can make revenue on YouTube and they don't have to. College is way too much, man. Like if you go to a really good college, like when I got out of college, that was 93 to 96. It was about $2 to $3 grand a year. And that was at a university. But now you're talking about 10, 15, 20. Get out of here.
Yeah.
After you're done, $100,000 to be taught something that if you're good at, you can do on your own. It's just like with music. I cover jazz. The best education any of these cats get is getting on stage. And I'm not taking away from college, and I'm all for people that want to get higher education. But if you're good and you go right out there and you do it, there you go, man. And I think that there's a lot of people. I love the idea that it doesn't have to be corporate. It doesn't have to be a company. If you're good at it, we have freedom and latitude in a way that's wonderful. The top podcast in the country right now is from a guy that got tired of the corporate rat race, and he's doing it the way he wants to, which is Joe Rogan. You may not agree with everything he says. You may not be into everything he talks about, but at the end of the day, he's living the life and the dream that he wants. And I think after living through COVID, we've all looked in the mirror for long enough. No matter how old you are on this planet, if you want to do it, do it. And if you're good enough, you're going to get recognized for it.
Oh, 100%. I agree with everything you said. And, the reason why I asked you that, because this happened recently. I watched it. I followed this, a reporter. He covered UFC events and stuff like that, mostly MMA. And he did a video talking about that where, he went to college for journalism. He learned the business side and then got into broadcast and all that stuff. But he was saying that, like now one of my favorite reporters is the Schmo, and he has his own brand. And he was talking about how now, a lot of the gatekeepers are, the people who's been in the industry for 30, 40, 50 years, they don't like not all of them, but some of them don't like how some of these guys are coming up, creating their own brand, and they're able to, get these interviews with, big stars and cover the MLB and all these type of events without having to go through a major organization, right? And I agree with you. I think now we're at a time, college, very expensive. And if you know what you want to do and you're able to get those reps in, like you said, doing, internships, or, you creating your own content, you get those type of that repetition that might take you a little long if you go the college route, because most of the time you got to take classes that have nothing to do with your major.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to ask you on, because I noticed you said you did writing for a while. Did you enjoy that part of it? When you left that to do your own neon jazz interviews, what made you decide, actually, let me switch. What made you decide to jump to that? Was it because you got tired of the rigorous schedule as in that line of work, or what was that?
This is a passion project. I do this on the side, and I did it because it's been my dream my whole life. I have always had one dream of getting in and being a broadcaster in whatever capacity that would be. Now, early on, I wanted to be on the set of ESPN. I wanted to be right up there next to Keith Olbermann and all the cats in Bristol. I was ready, and it got to a point where that wasn't the avenue that I wanted to do. Getting into sports radio was definitely something that I decided I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So when you say marketing your own brand, Neon Jazz, sometimes people are like, man, they think there's like 20, 30 people or whatever that are working for it. It's me. I am Neon Jazz, and this is my entity, and this is my brand. And I get interviews with people from Sonny Rollins all the way down. And I remember in the beginning when I would get the interviews, I'm like, all right, these cats are calling up, they're reaching out. They don't know me from anything, but they know that the passion is there. And it's the same thing with you. Immediately when I interviewed you, you have the passion, you have the fire, and you can't replace that. Same thing with Denzel. The reason why people watch him act is because he has a fire that is unmatched by almost anybody in Hollywood. And when you have that fire, it doesn't matter what logo's on your microphone. If you do it well and you get out there and people feel it, because that's what the connection is. Ultimately, at the end of the day, with what you're doing too, people feel the connection to you as a human being. And that's not a logo. That's not something that's branded as something big. It helps. Yeah. If you're on ABC, NBC, CBS, whatever, it helps. But at the end of the day, we are in an era where you can choose your own destiny. Like the books where you could just squib off and choose your own adventure. That's where we're at. And good for us for being existentially free to do whatever we want to do with our lives. I hope I didn't
100%.
run around that question. I get off
No,
on
you
a
got
tangent.
it. You got it. You got it. It's definitely like you said, a lot of people need to understand, times are changing, right? And it's always going to be like that. But at the same time, there are some core principles that still there with journalism and stuff. So one of the things I want to ask you on, especially, with you in the sports world, like I said, I watch more MMA, so it might be different in the, MLB, NBA. But we constantly, actually, in the NBA, we do hear often a lot of athletes are criticizing the media. The reporters. They're coming out with clickbait articles. They're coming out with controversial questions that people don't want to answer, and they ask the same questions all over and over and over again. And it's not. They don't feel like it's benefiting them. Do you think that's something that that can change, or do you think that that's always going to be there? The clickbait, titles and all that stuff.
I think it's going to persist, man. Unfortunately, and that's the reason why I got out of sports broadcasting. The level of questioning and how banal it is, and how these guys have to endure all the pain. That's when the thing that goes viral is when the coach finally snaps. He's like, damn, are you kidding me? You're going to ask me something stupid like that? And it's just the same thing. Like a guy hits a home run. Like I was at Royal Stadium this summer with my son, and I saw one of the most magical things that I've seen my whole life. I'm 50 and I've never seen anything like this. A rookie guy hit a home run in like the bottom of the ninth inning, his first hit ever. That place went nuts, and the Royals are in last place. There's nothing to cheer on, but this was magnanimous. And I can't imagine, like, your thing is like, how does it feel? Like, that's the thing about reporting for sports. How does it feel? What were you thinking? What was going through your mind? I mean, I could go through all of those, and it's like, my God, guys, come up with something else to ask. Come up with something a little bit more personalized. If you're a journalist, same thing with an athlete. Athletes are expected to dig harder, to be better, to do something that's more magical. That's why people like Aaron Judge and all these other people are where they're at. They do something special. Reporters should do the same thing. It shouldn't just mean I have this laminate, I'm coming in, I'm meeting these people I consider heroes. You got to strip yourself of that. You are a professional that's trying to get at the heart and soul of things. And I think that's my brand of journalism that never meshed with the sports world. I want to interject and get to the bottom of something in a way that it's maybe a little bit different, but a little bit more to the personalization of who they are. For instance, with musicians, I want to get to who they are. I don't need to know all the meters and lines and what this bridge was and why they did this melody, why they picked a ballad versus this. I want to know, who are you? Where did you come from? How did you get to this point? What's special? And I'm going to keep going back to Denzel. The thing about his life is that there's this story, this backstory that gives them that fire. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, well, how do you remember lines? Well, okay. I mean, you're a human being. You're an actor. You remember things. You learn how to do it enough, right? And you're an
Right.
actor. You do that. But I want to get to the essence of why you are who you are. And I think in
Mm-hmm.
sports and in general, athletes and actors and all these people are tired of these canned, idiotic, stupid things that come out of reporters' mouths on either the red carpet or in a press room, because it's just it's dribble, and it's got to evolve to a better place. And if it does, this whole thing will go away. Now, clickbait's another thing. Clickbait is just an evil thing because Google Ads is just something that people want to make money off of. And if
Right.
you fall for it, you fall for it. It's kind of a couple tiers up from either spam or bad telemarketing. But
Right.
that's the reason why I kind of got out of journalism early on, because I didn't want to be that contentious type. I really want to lift up the people that I'm talking to. I want to celebrate no matter how high up they are or no matter how low, so to speak, they are. It's about the connection and celebrating this human walk that we're all on. And I think sometimes we get lost and mired in all of the nonsense because we're a journalist and we're supposed to do this. You have people just have to try harder and do better.
Yeah, people, I think people are, you know what, that I'll take a step back and I'll be a little objective. I understand why certain, journalism do the things they do, right? Because we are living in a society now where everything needs to go viral,
Yeah.
and especially when you're trying to compete with the big brands, ESPN, for instance. You trying to get more people to come to you because everybody knows an ESPN. So how do you set yourself apart? You create these fake, not fake, but they create these clickbait articles and stuff like that, which is fine. I understand it's business. That's part of the thing. People need to realize it is a business, but at the detriment, a lot more athletes are going making their own YouTube channels, doing their own podcasts, or do their own thing because they don't like the current state. Now, I would ask you though, as more people creating their own brands, their own identities, they don't need so much to join a ESPN, which is still the juggernaut, not taking that away from them. But people are finding success doing their own thing. Do you think as more people realize, hey, I don't need to go to a major corporation to be successful, that is going to allow some creativity? Because we know on the business side of things, you go on the show like ESPN, you may not be able to ask those questions you may want to because legal stuff and all that stuff. So do you think when more people are creating their own brands and identities, it will make journalism a lot better?
Yeah, I think it already is. I think it's raising standards right now that are totally different. I think as an independent guy that's producing a jazz show and an interview series, I can do things in a way that is different from a corporate entity. Now, a corporate entity would give me a bigger audience, and I would love that. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about it's a personal choice. But I think that personal choice, if you want that freedom and creativity, again, it goes back to that notion that I said earlier on. If you're good at what you do, you're going to get the people that are going to follow you. People are going to fall into tow and they're going to dig it. But I think it really will raise the integrity and overall strength of what we have. And I think it has. I think it genuinely has done that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, we talked about that a lot. I want to switch over to what you do now. Neon Jazz interviews. So you started that in 2011, and radio is still one of those. It's an interesting thing. I know like Howard Stern is still one of the top radio personnels, But radio has always been one of those things where you want to get on, you want to be involved. I even, when I went to St. Bonaventure University before I graduated 5 years ago, I had my own little radio station, radio show on there, the DJ Long Walks on the Beach. That's how I went. And it's a lot harder than I thought it was.
Yeah.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a lot harder than I thought it was. But for you, especially with jazz, what made you, how did you decide to get into um, jazz and turning that into a podcast slash radio show? How did that come about?
So getting it was just like with my friend John Christopher that had a studio that I, unbeknownst to me, next to me. I could have picked any genre when he said pick a script, and I happen to pick jazz because I love it. I've loved jazz for a long, long time. It's not by any means the only thing I listen to, but if I really boil down something that interests me, that is always fresh, and I always discover something new, it was jazz. So I remember after doing that first script, man, my adrenaline level was so amped up after doing that. And then I remember telling John Christopher at the time, pretty early on, because after I did my first show, he said, come back, we'll do it every week. And it's turned into therapy for us. John Christopher was my best man at my wedding in 19, and
Mm,
he's been my mentor. He is the reason I got into broadcasting. I got out because the nature of broadcasting can be abrasive and can be real cutthroat. He is the nicest cat in the world. I love John Christopher, but I told him, if I do this, I want to get the story of jazz from the musician. I don't want it to be told from the history books or from anything that's on the web or whatever. I want to go to the musician. So that's been kind of a byproduct. And when I started doing that, it's like once I got the first tattoo, you want more. So once I got in there and I got that bug, I started kind of on the side branching out and interviewing other people. Like one of my favorite musicians of all time is based in LA. His name is Jason Faulkner. He tours with Beck. He's unbelievably talented. He tours now with St. Vincent, and he did a lot of solo work in the 90s, and I'm a huge fan. I got to interview him, and then I started interviewing other people. Like I interviewed Rudy from the movie, the football player. I was doing some work for a station called Current TV. Al Gore, when he lost to Bush, set up this network on cable, and they had correspondents around the country, and I was the Kansas City correspondent. So I would cover floods and all these things, but I would reach out and talk to other people, and it
right.
gave me the bug. It's like, all right, I have kind of this storefront. Let's go from there. And then what led to us interviewing was I got approached by this service called Podmatch, and they were like, it's one of the first places that you can go to that will actually compensate podcasters, which is an alien concept unless you have a huge audience and advertising and things like that. So I said, well, let's give it a shot. And I just ran into all these people like you. And I was like, this is fascinating. Like all of this is wonderful to expand from. So I really expanded from doing jazz, which I still do all the time, to doing other people. So it just kind of turned into this bigger organism. But at the end of the day, to get to the original idea, I think no matter how hard it may be, it's the passion that goes into it. And I absolutely think, and I can't shout this louder from the mountaintop, jazz musicians of all the people that I've met on this planet are the finest human beings I've ever talked to in my life, been around. I mean it. Like I always joke around that jazz musicians are like the Swamis in Cloud City and Empire. They are the ones that are up there that are like magical. Like I'll get off the phone with some of these guys. Like Dr. Lonnie Smith was probably one of those guys that was beyond this planet. And it's hard for me to put words on it, but there was a kindness, there was an empathy, there was a truth, there was just a genuine, like wonderful human being that I just couldn't believe. I just got away. Sonny Rollins was the same way. The higher up you go the food chain of jazz, the bigger these cats are, the more humble and grounded they are. All these cats want to do is do their craft and pass that torch on to the others and do it as hard as they can. And they are. I mean, like modern cats like Christian McBride and all these guys. And I've interviewed all of these guys, and they're all really gracious and they're all wondrous human beings. So one of the big hooks for me doing this as long as I do is that I absolutely love these people. I love the feeling when I heard Kind of Blue by Miles Davis and I got that initial serum of warmth from a speaker, I was hooked. But I am more invested than ever because the people behind this are wondrous. And I didn't feel that way with athletes. I really felt like the athletes were a different breed. And I'm not trying to bag on them at all. I'm just saying that it's just a different culture. So that's why it works for me.
That's beautifully said. I will say, yeah, athletes, jazz. Yeah, I've noticed the more, nothing to take away from athletes, but people in their entertainment industry, mostly jazz musicians, actors, people who do more creative things, tend to be a little more easier and outspoken. You know, they have that personality that makes you admire them, which is why I love Denzel.
Yeah.
And you know, the funny thing is actually a conversation me and my girlfriend had recently where she's always wanted to go to a jazz lounge. Right now, New York City, there's not many as much anymore. I think
Yeah.
there's maybe one or two, maybe. But it's definitely a you know, a genre of music that's still well beloved. And I think one of the things for you, what makes you stand out, is you don't really hear a lot of jazz centric things anymore. Now everything's kind of blending lights, or people only want people who are the most popular names,
Yep.
usually rap artists. Um, but how, you know, to go back to, you know, when you started the journey, you know, you've been doing it 12, 13 years almost now. What was the for you? Because you know, when I first started this podcast, I went through a couple different names. It took me at least a year or two to get my identity down together. Was that it for you, or did you know exactly when you started? This is what I'm doing, and I'm set on that.
I had a pretty good idea, but when I listen to my early shows, it's like the first season of Seinfeld. It's like that was a little clunky, man. It was a little like, wait, how did the show become top rated? So yeah, dude, yeah. When you put that mirror up in front of you, the early years are always going to be like, my God,
That was terrible.
why I could have had one more cup of coffee and it would have been okay. But but yeah, you know, I think in the beginning I really felt it. I'll tell you one of the seminal interviews that I had. The flautist Hubert Laws, he who worked with Quincy Jones and all the cats, like he is
Nice.
always top rated. I don't know how in the beginning he was like, I'm gonna agree to interview with this guy. He had left a message on my phone and everything, and we got back and we talked. And I remember when we talked in the very beginning, he said, I went to a car wash today, Joe, and he lived in LA, and some guy came up and freaked out and saw him. And basically, he told me a story, which was I've spent my whole life amassing and accumulating things, memories, money, clout, records. And he said, I finally hit an age where I'm giving it all away. I'm giving away the story. I'm giving away the pretense. And it was one of the things without him coming out and saying it where it's like, I just want to talk to people. I want to reach out. I want to feel like a human being. And I remember there was such a profound feeling from him I was so grateful. He gave me the shot. He was one of my first big interviews. And it's like, once you start getting kind of that street cred, so to speak, others are like, oh, you know, they were on there. And then it just kind of steamrolls. But more than that, they know whether you're serious or not. And I think that's the key to this. I think once I realized I interviewed a couple of these cats that were big name, and I realized that I had a genuine passion for this music that was real, it was like this is the place I need to be. And it's been dreamy, man. Honestly, it's like this whole thing, working with these guys, you know, getting the music consistently in my mailbox and covering it and talking to them and feeling their exuberance. Because it's like you said, it's not a mainstream format, but man, these guys that do this artwork, it doesn't matter what they get paid. They feel it. And I think you hit that certain point in your life. I just hit 50 last year, and there's revelations that you hit when you hit a certain age. We aren't leaving with any of this, man. And if you feel the passion and you feel the artistry, it's really good if more people know about it. But at the end of the day, you have to go to bed with your own thoughts. Your own head hits that pillow, no one else's. And if you're doing it for the right reasons and you're an artist and you're putting it out there with your soul, man, there's nothing better than that. And that's what all these jazz cats do. And, you know, there's a lot of them that make good livings and money, and there's a lot of them that are in academia. But there's a lot of them out there that are just trying to make rent and doing their thing, but they're still happy. And real quick, just a quick offshoot of this. I remember when the COVID happened in March of 2020, I was like, what am I going to do? You know, I have a son that's on the spectrum. His two favorite things are baseball and school. And it went away. And I'm like, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do here.
Right.
So I started interviewing more and more than I ever did before. And I have a stepdaughter too. And you know, Jillian Miles would be in the car with me while I would do these interviews with the speaker on. And when I look back on that, the way that those cats were talking to me was so strong, so confident. I mean, these were people that were in the middle of New York looking at Times Square empty, freaked out, had no idea when they were going to work again. No one knew anything, especially in New York, got it the worst. I mean,
Oh
all
yeah.
these people in these buildings in Brooklyn, and the allure of hearing a saxophone for the first week or two goes away, and people are banging on walls. Shut up, stop with the sax. So it's like, but these guys, I would interview them all over the world, Paris, London, Israel, all over the place. And my kids would hear this and hear the confidence and exuberance, and they would be able to talk to them. And that was so cool, man. It was like in the middle of the tempest, in the middle of the world shutting down. These artists were just brimming with the same life as they do now in this post pandemic world we're living in. And that's beautiful, man. That's a beauty that no dollar will ever be able to give me any level of satisfaction more than just knowing that that's, it's just who they are. And to be able to cover them, man, it's a nirvana, man. It's beautiful.
Wow. Man, what you just said made me think of this story. I've never said it on a podcast. It made me think during the pandemic, I was living in LA at the time. And I remember I was coming back to New York City. I'm in the Uber. I'm with the driver, and we're talking. We're chatting because I just came from shooting a YouTube channel for a popular YouTube company, and we was talking. And he was telling me he was a musician, rock musician, older guy. I think he was about 55 around, but him and his buddies got together, 30 years ago, and started doing music together. And he was telling me how, like, he started doing Uber because he was getting scared. He's like, I got kids, I got a wife, I got, bills to pay. How am I going to do that? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, you know what, at the end of the day, I know that my creativity is going to come back, and it's just a matter of time for the world to get to that point where they want to hit the music again. Because even during the pandemic, we saw artists find creative ways. I know in hip hop, at least, they did this whole thing, verses where icons from hip hop would come together and do live performances on Instagram Live, and all types of things. And it was such beautifully uh beautiful to experience such a moment with him, because it was something that, even for me, first of all, I would have never thought I would meet somebody who was able to do live shows in Vegas,
Yeah.
do Uber. That's how bad it got. And for him to still be optimistic, like, we're still looking for shows, we're still going out, we're still trying, but it is scary to see that. Now, like for you, I was actually going to ask you, how did the pandemic go, but you already kind of explained that. But for you, have you seen a shift now, from the pandemic to now? Do you think more people are a little more, uh, now that things are out of the red zone as we speak, people are a lot more happy, a little more motivated, and they feel rejuvenated now because they had the time to work on themselves and come back stronger?
Yeah, man. Yeah. And a lot of these cats were woodshedding and coming up with material and working on themselves and all of that. I mean, the crowds, the appreciation they have. And I know for me, one of the last shows I saw before the pandemic happened in Kansas City at the Nelson Atkins, it's our big museum. They have an auditorium. And I went and saw a guy named Bill Frisell, and he's a guitar player. And I remember taking my wife to it. She was like, "What's this show going to be like?" I'm like, "I have no idea," because this guy's all over the place. But he's on the inside. He's a musician's musician. He is beloved by everybody. And he had Petra Hayden, who's a singer, and it was a trio. Anyway, at one point, and this was like on the 8th of March, 2020, it was a real eclectic show. And at one point she said, "I want everybody to rise up and we're going to sing together, We Shall Overcome." And everybody started standing up and people started swaying. And it still freaks me out thinking about it. And it was almost like we were cattle before the tornado. We knew that the first cases of COVID were coming out, and she's leading us in this whole "We Shall Overcome," and we're swaying. And then right after that, Bill busts into David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust, which is the thing. You don't know what you're going to get into with Bill Frisell. But I
Wow.
remember that show, and I remember talking to musicians, and I was like, that was one of the last shows I saw. But as a journalist, when I get these passes, I always sit there, I take a breath, and I'm like, man, I am watching beauty happen. It's going to unfold in front of me. But I think people are seeing that more and more live. And I think there's all of these people are releasing albums. And from my end of the microphone, not interviewing exclusively about what you're not doing, but what you are doing is just revelatory, and it's so good. And it's almost like we survived a rapture. It's like, here we are all left behind. What did we do? And that was my whole mantra the whole time during COVID. We got to keep living. It's a monopoly. We have to do the best we can. This is the Bob Dylan moment. If you're a creative person, are you kidding me? We had George Floyd. We had a pandemic. Like, America can't just have one thing. We got to be
Right.
like, oh, there's a bonfire. Let me go get the biggest tub of gasoline and just throw that thing in the middle of it, you know?
That's true.
And so we went from that to a class war to all of these things. But I think the car was teetering on the edge. We've had problems for a long time in this country with treating each other equally, and rightfully so, whether it's from a janitor to a police officer to anybody in any position. We have to get to a point where hopefully this pandemic taught all of us that we have to treat each other better, man. And that's the reason why podcasting, like, I can't believe that podcasting became such a big thing. I just would do it all this time. And it was like a vacuum. And it was like, I'm just doing it because I do it. And then all of a sudden it was this hip thing. And here we are now in 2023. And it's like the big thing. But I think it's therapy for all of us. I think it's
Right.
really good for us to be able to, like, communicate. We wouldn't, man, Percy, you and I may have run into each other at some point, maybe randomly down the line, but probably not. And we would have never had this kind of FaceTime with each
Right.
other. And that's why this is a beautiful art form. And I think when we look back on this and we pull the whole camera back and we look at that long view of the movie we're making, we're going to say podcasting is an art form that really saved humanity to a certain degree, really did a lot of good for us.
Oh yeah, most, you know, and that was the reason why I started it, because during the pandemic, I remember I was talking about it on your platform, so I won't get into it too much because I'm sure people heard it before. But like, for me, being an actor, my agents were, they were trying to find me work. I was like, what am I doing? And I found a lot of myself, and I lost my brother, and then I'm finding myself in this constant state of, when's the next audition? How am I gonna find the next thing? And it just became one of those things where I was losing motivation. I was waking up a lot of days, don't know what I was doing, just vaping, eating, all types of, junk food and playing video games. That was my days. And then I got into podcasts, and I'm like, let me try. People always say you should use your acting skills for podcasts. I tried it, and then bam, people
Yeah.
actually like it, And I think one of the things you said, and one of the grateful things I've been able to do was do mental health podcasts, because it seems to me podcast has become one of those things where people get to just sit down, relax, and just listen to people talk and even relate, right? Because even with YouTube, Instagram, I love all those things, but sometimes they are one of those things where you it has to keep your attention all the time, or you exit. Podcast, you could be in the car, you could be stuck in traffic,
Yeah.
watching the kids or whatever, and you just sit down and watch it, listen to it or watch it. Now, I was going to ask you too, actually, you touched on it, but you started like Joe Rogan. He started this, I think, like 2008, 2009. So you wasn't that far behind him.
Yeah.
So to see from it go from a niche audience to where it is now, how cool is it for you?
Oh, it's beautiful. And the coolest thing is that with a lot of the jazz stuff, especially, musicians listen to it a lot, and I hear from them, and they're like, I just listened to your latest episode. It kind of freaks me out. I'm like, wait, hold on. I just released that a couple days ago. Someone's listening to that. And I really do feel like that. I mean, I'm grateful, but yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that are tuning in to all of us. And oh man, it's so cool. It's like, because I've always picked the hardest thing to do, whether it's writing or visual arts. I mean, I still do spoken word poetry in Kansas City, and there's nothing that gets, I mean, there's good crowds that come out to some of those things, but at the end of the day, I always pick the most difficult thing to do that won't get like the right money or crowd. But
Right.
at the end of the day, this is one of those things where it's like, wow, I picked something that's actually really like kind of become a thing right now, and it's really cool. And I delve more into podcasts and listen to people. And there's so many amazing things going on that are being financed through just people digging it. Like, like there's people that they'll put out albums and they'll have that GoFundMe page. And it's like, there's no better feeling than to go into a project knowing that before you walk into the studio, people already completely support it. And I feel like that's the way all of us are with podcasting. No matter what we're like, whatever revenue we may have or don't have, we're going to do it. This is like jazz. Podcasting is like jazz. It's a passion project, and we're going to do it because it feels right. It's the art for right now.
Oh yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's crazy to say. This is podcasting is not, it can be very lucrative, but when you start off and you get into it, it may not be the most lucrative thing, right? And so, but one of the things, like you said, is therapy. A lot of people enjoy it, and that's why now you see some of the biggest artists in the world having podcasts,
Yeah.
and everybody has one now. Why? Because people want to talk, and I think that's one of the things about the pandemic. I remember you asked me about this. That's for me. The pandemic was such a great thing. Well, not 100% great.
Yeah.
Obviously, we lost a lot of people. People lost homes and stuff,
Yeah.
but you were able to refocus, re-energize yourself, and especially if you're a creative jazz musician, actor, whatever, you were able to recenter yourself, figure out, okay, what can I do in the meantime? Okay, I can write more music. You know what? I've been meaning to work on this album, on this project. This is the time for me to do it. So now that people are going back to shows, it's crazy. My girlfriend went to go see a new I think she's Ed Sheeran's protege.
Yeah.
She's not a big name, and I don't think the wider audience would know her. But she told me she went to go see her, I think in Radio City, sellout crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, independent artists who aren't popular are able to sell out shows because people want to see that demand. And I'm sure for her and Ed Sheeran and all these other artists, they were able to come together. Whether it was together, collab, or just each other, or within themselves, and really work on their craft, work on the music, work on something that maybe they was weak on, and now they're coming back and they're able to thrive and stuff. So I think that's one of the things you touched on that I 100% agree with.
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely a renaissance, man. There's the live music thing. Like, I think it's a part of the Taylor Swift phenomenon right now. People are like, let's go, let's get out, let's breathe the air, let's get together, let's be human. I mean, when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl and people are like, are you going to that parade? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the parade. Are you kidding me? Because if anything else, because I'm going to see Mahomes as a little spot with the silver thing coming out of his hand, but I'm going to be there for that celebration of being alive on this planet. And there's no better way to do that, because when you go to a Super Bowl parade, it is everybody from every walk of life with every single belief that you have, and you all agree on one thing. There's no divisiveness. We're all like, man, we're alive. Our team won, and let's go. Let's have a good time. So
100%. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The unity that is, we still got a little work to do, but I do think many people are starting to reunite, and we see a lot of, even in the music where a lot of people have problems with each other, come out the pandemic, they best buddies now.
Yeah.
They're doing projects together. It's a beautiful thing, and that's why I said the pandemic was something that unfortunate for the casualties and stuff, but it was a time that we needed to heal each other, heal within ourselves and come together. Because now we're seeing, I know they just did I didn't go, but they did in the Bronx at the Yankee Stadium, they had this whole, I think it's the 50th anniversary of hip hop. All these people that faded into obscurity are able to come on in that show.
Yep.
And now they're reaching new audiences. Their fan base who've been clamoring for another project or to hit a song, they're able to come together. I was listening to LL Cool J. He was talking about this. He was saying that he's been acting for a while, but for him, when he pulled up to the Yankee Stadium, he's walking to the stadium, he's seeing everybody, musicians playing drums, people playing trumpets, people rapping to beatboxes, and that community thing wouldn't have happened. I mean, it could have, but I think the pandemic made people appreciate everything a lot more. So, and I do think jazz is one of those things where, I didn't grow up on jazz. I'm not too familiar with it, but I do know it is making everybody I know so far are loving jazz. They get into it. They playing. One of my buddies, he's actually getting into playing for jazz clubs and stuff now. I think it's one of those things that re-energize jazz. Do you think? Or
yeah. Oh, I definitely think. And that's what I was hoping over the pandemic, is that there would be a re-energizing thing. A quick story. I went to a Bobby Watson show. We had shows in Kansas City during the pandemic at this place called Plex Pod, and you would park your car and lift your back hatch up. and I had a Downbeat magazine shirt on, which is kind of the jazz Bible. And I'm walking by, and there's kind of this big country looking dude with the cowboy hat, belt buckle, and he was like, "What's Downbeat?" And I thought he was jacking with me, and I just didn't go there. And I was like, "Oh, it's Downbeat. It's a jazz magazine, huh? What do they do?" And I was just thinking, man, where's the camera at? Am I going to mess with it?
Gonna be on YouTube.
Yeah, what are we doing here? And we ended up having a good conversation, and he was genuine about it. He had his daughter there, and they started listening to jazz on a late night station during the pandemic and loved it so much they became fans and went to see Bobby Watson, who's one of the biggest names in all of jazz, who happens to be in Kansas City. And it's like, that's the kind of thing I was hoping would happen over the pandemic. People would revert to a more analog, rustic notion of music, the beginnings, the etymologies, the original swinging, roaring 20s and 1920s after the Spanish flu was jazz. That's what revitalized this. People were dancing. Fletcher Henderson, Duke Ellington at the Cotton Club. All these cats were tearing it up. That was the popular music. And I thought, how cool would it be if that came back? So I think there's a level of it that's hip with the young people, but I think there's always going to be a level of it that just makes you feel good. But it's kind of like anything. It's like you're either a Beatles person or maybe you're an Elvis person. You might be
Right.
jazz or you might be blues. It all depends on how your brain works. For me, there's so much going on with jazz, it just calms me down. But for other people, it just raises the temperature too high. They just need a little bit of the blues, a little bit of BB King, and I'm okay. So it all depends on where you're at. But I think overall, jazz, the appreciation, it's always going to be one of the hipper musical artistic institutions on the planet for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely I've been studying a little bit of it and getting involved because during my process of looking for a jazz club, I'm like, she wants to go. Let me see if I can find one. And I remember actually a lot of the old classic movies that I enjoy. They had a lot of jazz scenes, jazz music, and one of the things I will say about jazz is no matter who's involved or the type of crowd or scene or people coming together, when that music hits and you got the dance floor, everybody's out there enjoying themselves. I love that about jazz. It's one of those art forms that I feel like is kind of underappreciated, right? Because the newer generation, my generation, younger, typically don't really we care more about Drake than we do about other art forms, right? But now we're seeing more people. Oh, okay, I like this music. It's upbeating, it's upflowing, and it's actually. I'm actually kind of glad she told me about it because I didn't realize how great music it is and how much it makes me like. We actually dance. You put on jazz music, we'll dance right in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and it's fun. I enjoy it. So on that note, we've been having a great conversation, and I know you got more top jazz musicians to interview. But what is the future for you? Like, do you think that you'll continue on with the Neon Jazz name, or do you feel like you will kind of start branching out and looking at musicians and other genres as well?
I had a show for a little bit when I started Neon Jazz. It was called Hey Joe Radio, and I took the riff off of Jimi Hendrix. So where, hey, and I did like a lot of modern music. I love indie music. I think there's a real good spirit in all of indie music, and it just was too much. So I got to the point where it's like, I have to stay in my lane. I love this. And since I branched out to do more interviews with the Podmatch community, I think I got enough going on. I actually got an art show tonight that I'm going to do. We have a Crossroads Art District here in Kansas City, and I got a show that I'm getting groomed, and I'll do poetry readings here and there. So,
Nice.
and I try to be a family, the best, most available family guy that I can be. And so I think things are falling up, but you never know. I mean, I never thought I'd be involved with Podmatch and I would do all these other interviews. So you never know what opportunities will come along. I will tell you what, one of the more emotional interviews I ever had was with a jazz vocalist named Molly Hammer. She passed away during the pandemic and she survived cancer a few times. And I remember asking her, what did you learn from beating cancer the first time? And she said, I say yes more. And I've always remembered that. So at the end of the day, that's the one thing that I will say. Saying yes is something that I'm into. And I'm going to tell you one more thing about New York, and hopefully this lights a fire. That's my dream to get up there. Smalls is a great club you should go to. Village Vanguard.
Heard of it? Yeah.
Dude, I mean, if I could go up there, I interviewed a musician at one point, and he told me, I think he was from Houston. He said, when I finally went to New York and saw a professional, like a jazz set, He said he walked up the steps and stood looking over New York City, and he completely blacked out and fell to the ground, like completely fell like a tree. That might happen to me. If I get into the Vanguard and I come outside, bam, I'm going to be out, just out. So yeah, dude, if you do get to the club and see it, please report back to me. And I hope you do, because Smalls is macho. That is a lot of really good jazz artists, and like the top like musicians record through the label there at Smalls. Village Vanguard. I mean, there's a lot of hidden gems. So yeah, you probably will be changed forever to see some Major League Jazz in New York for sure.
Oh yeah, there's one place. If you ever do come, there's a place I've been looking at. Tommy Jazz. I think this place is a little more up on the west side, Harlem area. So far, I believe they've had some big names there, and the set I've heard is beautiful.
Yeah.
People, you come in, they have table seating, you can order food, drinks, and it's such a great time. The only thing I do wish, and one of the things about New York, about the jazz scene in New York, I do wish change, is the fact that we don't really have jazz clubs. Like most of them are jazz lounges, which is cool, but they don't allow you to dance.
Yeah.
I would love to do more of the dances. You go up there. I don't care if I got to sweat a little bit. What the hell? But yeah, it's definitely I feel like New York could use a little more of that, because now it seems like most of the clubs and stuff here are more towards hip hop, pop, maybe a couple rock stuff. But jazz, it's really hard to find a lot of stuff. But I have heard of the ones you're talking about. I think those are those in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken?
I think the Vanguard's right in the heart of New York, and Smalls. I can't
Vanguard,
remember.
yes, Vanguard, yeah. Smalls, I'm not sure.
Look up the Hot Toddies. They are kind of a new dance craze that's kind of spreading out, and they have it specifically get up, dance, feel it. This is it. So that's a good thing, and they're kind of spearheading that vibe in New York and spreading it throughout the country. So it's happening. If you want to dance, you'll be able to dance.
Wait, what is this thing called? I never heard of it.
The Hot Toddies. Toddies. Yeah, I just interviewed the brainchild. His name is Pete Solori, and he was great, man. And they stage shows and all kinds of things in New York. So if you check out their website, check those cats out. You'll dig it.
So it's an all girl band. Okay.
No, it's a mix. Yeah, it's
a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah. Smalls is located in Lower Manhattan. So it's I think a lot of the jazz ones in mid Manhattan, where everybody tends to go, most of them are lounges. So you got to sit down, pay a cover fee and all that stuff, but you can't dance. That's the only thing I wish they changed, is to allow people to dance. I'm surprised they got rid of the dance, part of it. But nonetheless, it's making a comeback. I know you busy. You got a lot. We could talk about. We could be on here for 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yes,
but it's good to see. First of all, it's good to see someone doing a genre. First, I haven't interviewed anybody who, likes jazz or interviews jazz. Artists, legends, and all that stuff, because it's definitely an art form. I feel like it is very underappreciated. 50 years ago, 30 years ago, it was, but now it seems like people care more about the popular thing. But it's good to see that you're, allowing people a platform to talk, because it's a beautiful thing. So, where can people find you if you have anything coming up that you want to share? Anything? Where can people find you and all that good stuff?
So the best place to go if you want to discover anything with anything I'm doing, from the podcasting to the show to artwork or anything, is just put my name as joedimino.com and it'll pull it up. And the name of the show is Neon Jazz. Google it and it'll come up in different intonations, whether it's the interviews or the show or anything. Just simplifying it by doing that. Google Neon Jazz and let's dance. Let's talk.
Let's dance. Let's do it. He got big jazz musicians to interview. I got to heat up some chicken noodle soup to, get over this cold. But, thank you, Joe, for coming on.
Man.
I'm sure you could keep it to yourself. But if you want to admit, I'm one of the most charismatic host
You are,
can,
man.
but
Are you kidding me? Why? I wouldn't have been back here if you weren't the most charismatic cat on the planet. I love your energy, Percy. You're a standout, cool cat, and I loved our interview, and I'm so glad to be here with you. So keep the charisma going. I know you will. You know,
yeah.
it's going to keep rising.
Before you go, I haven't been to that part of the world yet. United States part of the world. How is Kansas? Is it? It's not like New York, I'm sure, but like how is it there? Is it cold?
It's temperate like New York, and it's surprising. It's a surprising arts capital, man. It really has a lot of visual, a lot of music, a lot of things going on. We have the NFL draft. We're getting the World Cup soon. This is a hip little place.
Wait, yeah, I had that. I didn't know that. Yeah, I had the NFL draft. That wow.
Yeah, I went down. I was like, wait, this is Kansas City. It was on fire, dude. Yeah, this is a place that people never forget. When you come to Kansas City, and then barbecue, dude, you got to get a plate of barbecue and just forget about all of it. Just dig in and live it up.
Any place you recommend?
Oh, go Jack Back or Gates Barbecue. Those are staples.
Oh, I gotta try. One of the things, I just came back from vacation not too long ago, and I went down south for the first time, and I swear to God, I was like, the biscuits alone is way better than anything I've had in New York City. So now I'm trying to make it a mission to visit other places because
That's it.
I have to see what it's about. I have to see
Yeah,
it. So,
yeah.
and I'm
I
sure
love.
this is there a lot of jazz lounges there too, or
Oh yeah,
clubs, I should say.
yeah. We got the Blue Room, which is off 18th and Vine, the fabled district, world famous. We got the Green Lady Lounge. There's all kinds of places that are all over the place. Yeah, you let me know when you're here, and we'll break bread proper, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would love to. I would love to get some dancing going on because
I love it.
I'm part Cuban and I love hitting the dance floor. So
Oh, dude, I love it. The Cuban cats that I interview. Man, those are some of my favorite interviews. I mean, the music and the history and the infectious, like zeal for life. Forget about it. I love it.
I'm telling you,
That's
nobody
it.
does it like us.
That's
But
right.
well, again, thank you, Joe, for coming on. I
Yes,
know
sir.
you got other stuff going on. If you ever want to come back on, let me know.
Yes,
But
sir.
with that being said, everybody go check out Joe's podcast/radio show. And I'm going to have everything in the link so you can check him out for sure. And like I always say, a helping hand is a better hand. Give a shout out to Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Cheers.